Um, on the slide, you can see our mission, which includes, supporting member collaboration, network building, mentorship, and leadership to advance gender equality. Also, we have members all around the world, which you can see on the next slide. We have a membership structure with exclusive benefits, and you can check out our website, which is genderprofessionals.org, and you can also become members if you like to. So jumping on to what a Gender Cafe is. Gender Cafe is really about the production of horizontal production of knowledge. What we plan to do one every few months, and it's really about fostering the production and dissemination of applied gender research. And these are conversations with gender practitioners, academic activists on a lot of issues and questions that we have. It's a non-hierarchical sharing, so we would really appreciate if everyone shares their opinions, their experiences, their professionally, personally, and it's also a professional development opportunity for members who are interested in raising the profile of gender expertise. So just to make it more participatory, I would request all of you to share your name, pronouns, geographical location, and organization, if that's okay, in the chat. And we will keep coming back to discussions around your experiences. We'll have breakout rooms where you can engage in conversation much more. So yeah, then quickly just to introduce the breakout rooms. So we have 3 amazing speakers here who I'm going to introduce in a bit, but after we have the main presentation from each of our speakers, we are going to go into 3 breakout rooms, and Carmen here from the Secretariat is going to randomly assign people. We had a lot of interest in this particular event, so hopefully you can expect a part 2 to come up because we couldn't include a lot of people who were interested because of the Zoom limit of only 100 participants. But if you have any questions, please feel free to include them in the chat. We try to come back to them, and if we are not able to, we will get back to you over email. This event is being recorded, and the recording will be shared on our website, and we will also include any additional resources that the speakers share, or if any of you share, we would love to include those along with the recording on our website. So please feel free to share anything that you know of or have been working on. And please mute yourself when you're not speaking, just to be courteous to other people who are speaking. And yeah, so after the breakout rooms, we're going to come back to the main session again and discuss briefly whatever we discussed in the breakout rooms. So as you all know, today more than ever, it's important for us to have a critical and thorough lens about evaluating inclusivity of gender within policy and practice. And there are so many approaches and toolkits to do that in the world outside. So this Gender Cafe really just covers a few, and we have amazing speakers who are going to discuss their experience of working on some of these toolkits. So without further ado, I want to quickly go ahead and introduce our wonderful speakers and open the floor for them to talk about all the amazing stuff that they are doing. So first up, we have Jessica. Jessica is a gender equality expert and a gender equality and social inclusion specialist with 20 years of experience conducting GESI analyses, crafting gender action plans, managing organizational change management, and with a gender lens, and implementing systems level policy and practice change. She is also the founder and CEO of Equilo, which is an organization that uses big data, smart tech, and AI to support more efficient decision-making approaches for equality and performance. And second, we have Dr. Rosemary Morgan. She is an associate scientist at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health in the Department of International Health. She's also the Associate Chair of Inclusion, Diversity, Anti-Racism, and Equity for the International Health Department. And she has a broad range of expertise in gender analysis, and intersectionality for health. And last up, we have Sana. Sana is our third speaker, who's a cultural anthropologist, intersectional feminist, and a protection specialist with extensive experience in humanitarian development and the humanitarian development peace nexus. So I am going to open the floor and have you guys listen to our amazing speakers and pass it on to Jessica to start.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here. I will share with you a little bit about Aquilo, our mission, and an overview of some of our tools that I think some of you might find of interest. And I think you can advance to the next slide. Our mission as an organization is to hack equality for a happier, more just world. And the idea for Aquilo really stemmed from my own experience as a practitioner, conducting gender analyses, crafting gender action plans, doing field work, and doing often the very necessary step, which is doing a literature review, looking at what already exists in the world prior to consulting with people that are going to be impacted by or stakeholders by an investment, by a project, by a program. And the challenges that I saw as a practitioner, sometimes I was feeling that I was being brought in as a check the box exercise. I think that over the past years that has improved some, and I think that organizations really do truly care about making sure that they are considering gender equality and social inclusion, and really incorporating that into planning. But I think just in the rush to start implementing, to kind of get work plans done, and to move forward, there's sometimes pressure to very quickly complete a gender analysis, and sometimes the translation of the findings into work planning and into budgets and into monitoring and evaluation plans gets watered down. And so this was kind of bothering me for many years, and I also kind of wanted to see more kind of upstream decision making being made, so that when we, even at the point of seeing a request for a proposal from USAID or some other organization, instead of the request for proposal saying, women are great, can you please tell us how you're going to make sure women are great in this project, that it was getting a bit more specific and really demanding more and asking more, and that proposals could have more strategic thinking at that time, at the time of the proposal, to really commit to doing meaningful work. So that was sort of the challenge that I was trying to solve for. How can we get more specific, country specific, sector specific information into people's hands in a meaningful way, where it can actually inform decisions and work plans and budgets. And I'm not a technologist, or maybe I'm now, but I was not a technologist, but thought we must be able to use technology to make more efficient some of the work that we do. I don't think we could or ever should sort of automate the process of consultation, which is incredibly important to the process of gender analysis. But what we can do is look at how we can be efficient in pulling together and synthesizing data that already exists in the world, and also reducing the burden that data collection often has on the people that we are trying to serve. So in that vein, we created Aquilo, which is a data analytics as a service platform that pulls in large amounts of data that already exists in the world. And we have also started to create tools that also ingest primary data to really kind of integrate that, both secondary and primary data into analysis. But the purpose is to take large amounts of data, synthesize it, and show it in a simple and action-oriented way for users to understand and move forward with consultations and making decisions. And you can advance to the next slide, and I'll go over the first tool that we released a couple years ago, which is our gender equality and social inclusion contextual analysis tool. So we use the Transforming Agency, Access, and Power, or TAP framework as kind of the basic framework for all of our analysis. It's how we organize our data. So we have these areas of roles and responsibilities, access to resources, human dignity, knowledge and beliefs, law and policy, and power and decision making. So we basically mapped out all of the data sets that exist in the world. And even though there is definitely a need for more data and there are gaps in data, there's also a lot of data that already exists, and it continues to grow, which is fabulous. And we mapped out over, I think at this point we have 1,500 discrete gender equality and social inclusion indicators in our database that comes from thousands of sources, anything from the World Bank, from DHS, from UN organizations, to the Women, Peace and Security Index, to more kind of bespoke data sets that we've identified on specific topics. Then what we did is we sort of mapped and tagged all of those indicators by the different TAP domains, and then also kind of cross-tag them by more specific thematic areas, anything from gender-based violence to unpaid care work, sexual and reproductive health, land and property ownership, etc. So basically we have this very robust data set, tagged it, and made a score that kind of represents where a country and a specific sector in a country is according to the data that exists in the world already. So if someone logs in, selects a country like Kenya and a sector such as roads or agriculture, and you can get specific on value chains, for example. You see here a spider chart that gives you this overview where you can quickly see where there are opportunities and strengths in that country and sector as it relates to gender equality. We then also provide that you can kind of dive into each of these thematic areas, explore more, and also have kind of qualitative information beside that, which is the so what about the data. What we also didn't want to do is just present data. There's a lot of portals that exist that you can look up different data points and explore it that way. But what we wanted to do is contextualize it. So this could be used by someone who is a gender specialist trying to quickly do a literature review and move on to the important work of consultations and planning. But also people who are not gender specialists, so that they can quickly understand what the key challenges, constraints, opportunities are. And then we also have the action planning or what works section where you can filter. We have over 5,000 sort of things that you could do to advance gender equality and social inclusion, accompanied by tools and resources and links to all of those, with the goal of making it very action oriented to take analysis into what are we going to do about this. So right now we have many users who are using this really for that rapid assessment or getting a start on that literature review process. Anything from aid organizations, humanitarian organizations, as well as the private sector, financial actors who are using it for due diligence purposes and looking at where they might want to make more intentional investments. And then we can go to the next slide. Another tool that we have is our gender-based violence risk score. This is something that was really fun to create. And we also, by the way, have a large amount of tools on our platform. So I'm just going to show you this one and then kind of talk a little bit about where we're going next. But we have many, basically 10 tools and growing on our platform that do different things. This gender-based violence risk score, we developed the methodology along with our partner, the Criterion Institute, which is a think tank that is working on sort of disrupting the field of finance to have a feminist approach to finance and investments. And the work was funded by UNICEF with the goal of being able to communicate to this very different world of sort of an investor audience about what the threats of gender-based violence are, and hopefully inspire more investment in the prevention and response to gender-based violence. So even though it was built for this audience, it can really be used by any audience. We took a subset of our massive database and also organized using the TAP domain framework about 30 indicators to create an index for each country where we can see in laws and policies, is there high risk or low risk in terms of the regulatory environment around gender-based violence, anything from laws around domestic violence to access to abortion care, and things like knowledge and beliefs about what people's perceptions are in terms of accepting gender-based violence. So we have a wide number of indicators we use there. And it also allows people to basically look at what the risk level might be going into a project, going into an investment, going into humanitarian response around these different domains. We also wanted to really make sure that within this tool, and if you can sort of see from this picture here on the screen, that we were never communicating, even if there's maybe the risk isn't as high as some places as compared to others, that gender-based violence is ubiquitous, that it exists everywhere in the world. There's no country where it is not a problem. So we're very careful not to use language like no risk or low risk, but ubiquitous risk, which means you always need to be caring about gender-based violence. But there is some places where it's very severe, and you might want to think about taking actions in different ways depending on the severity of the risk that is in a certain country. You can advance to the next slide. The next thing I'll close on is that we're right now working on predictive modeling capabilities, which I find really exciting. So we have to date really focused as, I think, a community of practitioners focused on gender equality, on describing the current state of the world as it relates to gender equality and social inclusion, and perhaps the historical state and how we arrived here, or trends. But what we haven't done is really thought about how to think about the future. And that becomes really important, I think, for planning purposes, and also for engaging with certain audiences that do have power and influence in the world, that are really important for advocacy efforts and making change and making policy change and influencing capital flows toward improved gender equality. So we're doing some really fun work focused on predictive modeling, where we're taking all of the robust data that we have and looking at areas of economic growth and poverty and climate change and the Human Fragility Index, for example, and looking how they interact with gender equality and gender-based violence and what the trends are, with a focus on being able to simulate the future. So no one can predict the future completely, but we can, with a certain amount of probability, based on a large amount of data, say, if gender equality keeps moving at the pace it is, or it gets worse, or if gender-based violence gets worse, what happens to climate change in 10 years? Or what happens to economic growth in 10 years from now? And how can that then be translated into advocacy tools for people to use and communicate with different audiences, what the risks are today if we don't act. So that's something that we're really excited about, and that'll be coming up in early 2023, is some simulation tools where people can interact and kind of play with the state of the world and different variables, like if climate change changes or gender, and how that is going to impact on the world in the future. And then we're also looking at synthesizing more types of data. So right now we're using a lot of secondary data. We now have sort of organizational surveys, and then we're also looking at working with partners on how we can ingest sort of primary data that's collected in very localized contexts to provide a very robust, more kind of locally to describe kind of a localized issue or project or response. And then we're also going to be working on making some of the action-oriented solutions more intelligent. I still say, and we have a disclaimer, that no one should ever just take an action without having a gender specialist be part of crafting that in a very participatory way, but we can at least start thinking about solutions. And so we're building out some logic so that if there are certain gaps in a country, in a sector, in a city, in a camp, what are sort of the top things that you might want to be thinking about doing to take action? So that is it for Aquilo, and I'm happy to pass it over to the next speaker, and looking forward to diving in with you all in the small breakout rooms. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. We have Rosemary next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rosemary Morgan. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and it's great to see everyone, where everyone's from in the chat, and to be among so many other gender specialists. And I do see some familiar names in the chat, so that is great as well. As mentioned, I'm based at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health and the International Health Department, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Next slide. So, well, today I'm going to be talking to you about a very specific tool, which is gender analysis matrices, and how you might be able to use it as a tool within your own work. I did want to highlight some of the other tools that I've been involved in. You'll see one on the right there, the Gender Equality and Social Inclusion GESI toolkit for health partnerships. That has a health systems lens, and that was for THET. And then on the top right, you'll see incorporating intersectional gender analysis into research of infectious diseases of poverty. That was developed and published by TDR, and I was involved in the creation of that. And then in the bottom right is the gender analysis matrix from our Gender and COVID project, and I will be sharing that today. Next slide. So I am going to go into sort of what is a gender analysis matrix and how you're going to use it. But first, I wanted to highlight why we should use this tool, or why I pretty much always use this tool in most of my work. We all know, and I don't need to convince you, that a gender lens is relevant for pretty much all the work that we do that involves people, because power and power dynamics are always central to that. I have found, in my own work, that guidance on how to integrate a gender lens into research interventions or programs is not always particularly clear, and there are a lot of tools out there. Things are definitely improving in terms of finding the right information to help us do this. One thing I found that there was a lack of a systematic approach to integrating gender, thinking through how we might systematically integrate a gender lens in a way that was robust and evidence-based. Next slide. So what is a gender analysis matrix? So this is, it is a collaborative, adaptable tool to help and to assist in the systematic application of applying a gender lens to your work. It can be used in research, interventions, and program. It advances approaches to conducting gender analysis, including matrices originally developed by the World Health Organization. If you look at, they have a couple of tools. I know that they're updating their tool on gender responsive approach for health managers, and that included the original gender analysis matrix. And it is essentially a table to explore how gender power relations manifest to create inequities between and among women, men, and gender minority individuals. Next slide. So what I like about a gender analysis matrix, in addition to that, it allows me to take a very systematic approach to this in a collaborative manner, but it can be used at different points in the process. Of course, you should always be looking at integrating the gender lens right from the very beginning, but we all know we don't always get that luxury, and we're sometimes asked to come in halfway through a program, or even if you're doing research after data has already been collected and they want you to analyze it with the gender lens. And using a matrix is a way to be able to think through how you might be able to do this at all stages, depending on where you are in that process. It allows us to firstly identify key gender power relations which need to be considered within research interventions or programs. What should we be first thinking as relevant? We could use it to identify key areas for a gender situational analysis. What type of data should we be collecting in regards to the context? We could use it to identify how gender analysis can be conducted within existing or new data sets. We can use it to identify gaps in current research interventions and programs, and use it to collect and analyze data to identify appropriate survey or interview questions, codes, and variables, for example. There are other ways that it can be used as well. Next slide. So a gender analysis matrix uses a standard gender analysis framework, and I'm sure that you're probably all familiar, most of you will be familiar with gender analysis frameworks, and there's different ones that you can use. A gender analysis framework really identifies the ways in which gender power relations manifest as inequities alongside specific topic domains. Here is a framework that we included in a paper we published on how to do gender analysis in health systems research. And it really, if you're familiar with the Topigo framework in their health systems toolkit, it really maps onto that framework as well. So as you can see here, this framework, what it does is it allows us to ask specific questions around how do gender power relations manifest as inequitable access to resources. So in terms of who has what, as inequitable roles and practices, who does what, as inequitable social norms, beliefs, perceptions, how are values defined, and inequitable rules, decision-making, autonomy, who decides. And then also thinking about where is power negotiated and changed, both at the individual level, but also the structural environmental level. Next slide. Here, just very quickly, so you can vision what a matrix looks like. It's just basically a table. And I'm going to go through very briefly an example for infectious diseases. And you can see we've got the gender domains for the access to resources, distribution of labor roles, norms and values, decision-making power. Sometimes if I'm using the Topigo framework, I have institutions, laws, and policies. I've got specific topic domains that you choose based on your program. Here for infectious diseases of poverty, we have vulnerability to disease, exposure to disease, and response to illness. We also have a column to identify sex or gender desegregated data, and then important intersectional considerations questions. Next slide. So first, this is a sort of brainstorming where we often start, where we are identifying gender considerations at the intersection of each topic domain. So at the intersection of vulnerability to disease and access to resources. Might be that women will have a lack of access to financial resources, or we would put in there different varying degrees of access to different types of resources and how it might affect vulnerability to disease. Of course, we don't want to stop here because we don't want to make assumptions. We want to make sure we're evidence-based. So this is very much a brainstorming tool. Next slide. So turning those into questions now is the next step. So now, this is in relation to response to illness, and access to resources. To what extent do men and women have access to financial resources to pay healthcare access or supplies? And now I might go and look and find that data collected or look for existing data to answer that question. I should mention that the sex and desegregated column, that's where you put, data around maybe the prevalence of women and men who have access to a service, or maybe prevalence of HIV, prevalence of maternal mortality. That's the area where we can find where disparities and inequities exist, but not necessarily why. It's these gender analysis questions that help us to start understanding why those disparities and inequities might exist by unpacking gender power relations and the different ways in which gender inequities manifest. Next slide. Just very quickly, walk you through an example. I only have about a minute and a half left of my time. So I just wanted to walk you through an example from our Gender and COVID project. We actually use the matrix in quite a different, unique way here, but I've used it in almost all the ways I've mentioned before. Here we used it to brainstorm and record the different ways in which gender power relations affect infectious disease outbreaks. And our topic domains included risk and vulnerability, exposure, illness and treatment, and social, economic, and security impacts. So the topic domains, you decide about what is most relevant for your project and your area, and then you interrogate those vis-a-vis or against the different gender domains. Next slide. So our initial matrix included questions in each cell, which were posed for further reflection and analysis related to the intersection of each topic-specific domain and gender analysis domain. And we used it to identify evidence of how gender power relations manifested in each area. Next slide. Here is just a snapshot of that, and you can find this on the Gender and COVID Project website. Here, so you'll see, sorry, my alarm is about to go off. Stop, there we go. I'm going to wrap up. You'll see, so you can find us on our website, and this is just a snapshot where we started to put in the questions against the different COVID-related domains against these gender analysis domains, then went to go and look for data to answer these questions so we could start to understand how men, women, and gender minority individuals were differentially impacted and affected by COVID-19. Next slide. So I've sort of mentioned this. We used it to identify differential impacts. We also assessed media sources and gray literature to help identify this information. And these sources were especially useful in this particular instance, given the rapidly changing nature of the pandemic and the need to collect information quickly. So like I said, I've used this to collect primary data and secondary review. In this instance, we used it for secondary review. Next slide. Here is an example of the matrix on the website. You see there's a number of countries at the top. This is highlighting Nigeria. In this is the actual final data. You can click on each box. This is just a snapshot of one aspect in each box, but if you click on it, it'll give you more examples, and then you can click through to the evidence source. Next slide. So this is my final slide, and just to highlight, again, this was a really quick overview of gender analysis matrices, but I said that I use them pretty much in all my projects at various stages to identify the extent to which gender is already integrated into something, to identify important gender considerations I need to include. We all need to prioritize which gender considerations, because we can never include everything. This really allows you to systematically think about the role of gender power relations and integrate it into your work. It allows you to make sure you're asking the right questions and collecting appropriate data, and ensure you're considering the ways in which gender power relations may affect the ability of your research or intervention to meet its objectives. It's making sure that we're doing it systematically, so we're not just picking and choosing what we think is most important, and then also thinking about, often we might focus on access to resources and power and autonomy when we really should be looking across resources, norms, practices, and autonomy. So making sure we're looking across the different aspects. And so without doing so, if we don't do this, we're not only minimizing the impact of our work, but risk perpetuating and reinforcing harmful gender power relations. And you'll see there is a snapshot of a paper that explains the use of the gender analysis matrices in this instance, that you can use, that provides some guidance and details for that. So I will stop there and hand it over to the next speaker.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Off to you, Sana.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. And thank you, Jessica and Rosemary, for such a great presentation. I will be talking about gender analysis in humanitarian settings, and my focus will be much on the contextualization of our tools. So as you know, that after experiencing so many disasters during recent times, we know that the disaster, either natural or man-made, don't affect all individuals evenly. They are discriminatory according to the pre-existing structures. So the gender analysis examines the relationship among males and females of different ages, their different roles, power, and ability to make decisions. In humanitarian settings, gender analysis also provides the opportunity to analyze the impact of humanitarian crisis on women, girls, men, and boys, and help to design gender-sensitive interventions. When we talk about what is gender analysis, I think Rosemary already covered this section in detail, but I would just like to highlight that while working with communities during humanitarian settings, it is very important to understand and analyze the inequalities, intersectionalities, and power relations. Next slide, please. Why to conduct gender analysis? Gender analysis helps us to analyze the gender roles according to a particular context. It also helps us to identify root causes of gender inequalities and increase understanding about how to address them. It also helps us to identify different needs and priorities of men, women, girls, and boys over the short and long-term period of time. It enables us to collect sex disaggregated baseline data. Analysis support us to explore perpetuating traditional power imbalances and also help us to improve and enhance the sustainability of the project outcomes. Next slide, please. When we are doing the gender analysis, we have to keep in mind that overall gender analysis help us to understand gender-related inequalities, constraints, and opportunities. When to conduct gender analysis? There are like many organizations have their different understanding about conducting gender analysis at different level of project management, but when it is recommended to conduct it right after the contextual or situational analysis. And at the time of implementation, it is suggested to periodically reanalyze your gender analysis to enhance the effectiveness and relevance of the interventions. Next slide. Before conducting gender analysis, once we are preparing for the gender analysis, we have to keep in mind that we have all the secondary information. We have previously conducted context and gender analysis or any other research which is done earlier about gender assessment or any other relevant research. Okay. Yes, while preparing for gender analysis. So when we are preparing for gender analysis, it is very important to review our tool and make sure that they will be able to help us to collect precise, consistent, and reliable gender and age disaggregated quantitative data. And then the qualitative data will support us to explore the why and how of the particular context. Qualitative data looks like tools like focus group discussion, key informant interviews, participatory research methods, qualitative surveys, informal conversations with the communities and stakeholders will help us to analyze the power dynamics, imbalances, and existing inequalities. One of the most important tools I personally rely on is the observation that tells you a lot about what people say versus what they do. Yes, next slide, please. So as Jessica and Rosemary was also talking about tools, so there are some other tools also available. This includes UN OCHA, UN Women, USAID, CARE, and Oxfam Gender Analysis Framework and Toolkits. These tools and frameworks I have been using and customizing during my work, and we will be sharing these tools after these sessions. Talking about domains of gender analysis, domain of gender analysis include household and families, social relations, communities, ethnicity, religion, race, class, and age, civil society, and government. But please note that these are some of the standard domains of gender analysis, and there is a possibility of modifications according to a particular context or your thematic area. Next slide. Okay, so when we are talking about the contextualization of gender analysis tool, I think this is one of the most important questions we are having in mind. That please keep in mind that contextualization of any tool is the key to achieve expected result. While designing gender analysis tools, context analysis can be a key step to understand the dynamics of the community, and then we can further tailor our tool according to the need. Yes, I am done with my presentation. Anyone has any question?
Okay, perfect. So let's move on to the discussion period in the breakout rooms. I hope that this was a rapid overview for everybody, but we have about 20 to 25 minutes in breakout sessions with each of our speakers, and we would be randomly assigning people. You will have a pop-up on your screen that will say, ask you to join a breakout room, and you just click on the button and you will join the breakout session. And thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. And we're so sorry for cutting people off if somebody was speaking. I know that in my session with Jessica, Yin was speaking, and we're so sorry for cutting people off. But hopefully you all had fruitful conversations, and we can quickly just have a debrief of all the conversations that we had in each of the 3 breakout sessions. So can we start off with the breakout session with Sana, the humanitarian settings one? Would somebody like to share briefly what they discussed?
I was taking notes. There was a lot, of course, but I can summarize a couple of things. We talked about a lot of challenges, having, of course, time and resources to implement these sorts of tools. We need to train people. We talked about challenges of, being inclusive of intersectionality and inclusive of gender minorities, and, these tools sometimes. We had some really awesome and unexpected information from an astrophysicist talking about gender inclusion in the future of space missions and interplanetary exploration. So that was really cool. And yeah, sorry, I have so many notes. It would be hard to go through all of it, but yeah, and just a lot of challenges. And challenges in finding feminist research methods. So there's a quick recap.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Benna. And should we move on to Rosemary's session? And somebody wants to share from there, or if somebody wants to add to what Benna said.
I'm happy to come in, but I think, is it Georgiana, you took notes if you want to?
Yes, I can start and then you can add if I missed anything. So yeah, great discussion in this session as well. We mostly focused on the ways to operationalize gender tools, the ones that are available. So many participants shared their really practical experience from using and adapting different gender tools in their everyday work. So we especially talked about the application of gender tools and toolkits at the nexus with different issues, for example, gender and environment or gender and climate. And we stressed the importance of gender analysis when dealing with pandemics, disasters, and emergency situations in view especially of the current floods in Pakistan. So something else we discussed, the ways to actually do gender analysis and the kind of reliance on both primary and secondary sources. And the participants and Rosemary shared their experience on how we can do the best with the minimum resources, because this is a problem that it's encountered by everyone, time and resources and financing when trying to do gender analysis. So yeah, really a lot of insights were shared, and it was a great discussion. And Rosemary, please add anything else that you thought it was important.
Oh, that was excellent. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I took notes for Jessica's session, and I can pitch in for that. And Jessica, of course, feel free to come in. So again, in that session, we discussed more about Equilo's tools and how is Equilo using its tools to compare data from different countries, as well as in different languages, and how easily available is it. Jessica mentioned that some of the tools are open source, so they're available for anybody who wants to download it in case somebody is interested. And then we discussed about all of the different frameworks and again, data like the OECD and women's business and law, and all of these that feed into some of Equilo's tools. And then of course we discussed how this can be used for, how technology can be used to improve primary data collection going forward. And that's something that Equilo is also working on. And yeah, last but not the least, we thought about how to include different contexts from different countries within different settings, and also going beyond the binaries. And Mahmouda, she has a lot of experience. She worked with USAID and she was sharing some of her experiences as well. So I think that was very valuable. So yeah, I think that's what we discussed. But Jessica, in case I'm missing out on something, please feel free to add.
Maybe just real quickly, because I know we're at time. I think one of the other things that we discussed was kind of the importance of intersectionality, and just kind of this maybe challenge of especially if we're looking at data and there's not as much intersectional data available, kind of how do we use tools in a way that honors the need to include an intersectional approach into analysis. And then also, kind of sometimes there's different tools that serve different purposes for analysis or let you look at different lenses. And I don't think we discussed this, but I'll just maybe end on that. I think sometimes we get into analysis tool paralysis, where it's like, if I can't use what is the perfect tool to use? And there's so many good tools. And I think sometimes it's if people are getting stuck, like just start using just start thinking about things in these frameworks that exist, and just starting is sometimes helpful. Yeah.
Perfect. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Just as a follow-up, we were recording this, and we are going to share the slides, the recording, and any additional resources that everyone mentioned on our website. So please feel free to access that. If you have any ideas for any upcoming gender cafes, you can send them our way. We are always looking for more ideas. And we have, our email is info@genderprofessionals.org. We have a Twitter, we have a Facebook, we have Instagram. So please feel free to follow us and send us any more ideas if you have. And thank you so much for being here. If you want to join SGP, all of the information is available on the website as well. So hopefully we'll see you again in some of our future events. But thank you for being here, and hope everyone has a good day and week ahead.